The grand halls of the U.S. Capitol had seen their fair share of political storms, but today was different. The air was thick with tension, and whispers of a controversial resolution spread like wildfire. Inside the chamber, Republican lawmakers gathered in hushed discussions, their expressions grim, their voices urgent. At the center of the storm was Ilhan Omar, the Democratic representative from Minnesota. Known for her progressive policies and outspoken nature, she had long been a divisive figure in Washington. But now, things had escalated to an unprecedented level. A special committee had been convened, and rumors were swirling. Was the Republican-led Congress actually pushing for her deportation? It sounded impossible, even absurd. Yet, the corridors of power were buzzing with speculation. Across the room, Congressman Mark Holloway, a staunch Republican and key figure behind the resolution, adjusted his tie and leaned toward his colleague, Senator James Whitmore. "This isn't just about politics anymore," Holloway muttered. "It's about setting a precedent. She has crossed too many lines." Whitmore nodded, his expression unreadable. "We need to tread carefully. If we push too hard, we might turn her into a martyr." Meanwhile, just down the hall, Omar sat in her office, scanning her phone as news headlines flashed across the screen. Ilhan Omar, targeted in unprecedented congressional motion. Her fingers tightened around the device. She had faced political attacks before, but this felt different, more dangerous. Taking a deep breath, she turned to her aide, Leah Fitzgerald, her voice steady but tense. "We need to get ahead of this," Omar said. "Schedule a press conference. I won't let them control the narrative." Leah hesitated. "Are you sure? If we respond too soon, we might play right into their hands." Omar's jaw clenched. "If I stay silent, they'll paint me as guilty. If I speak, they'll twist my words. Either way, I refuse to be bullied into hiding." As the Capitol filled with murmurs and speculation, the battle lines were being drawn, and neither side was backing down. The next morning, a massive crowd gathered outside the Capitol. Protesters waved signs, some in support of Omar, others calling for her removal. Inside, the chamber was packed. Every seat was filled. Every eye was fixed on the front of the room where Congressman Holloway stood, holding a stack of documents. The moment had arrived. "Ladies and gentlemen," Holloway began, his voice ringing through the hall, "this is a matter of national integrity. Representative Ilhan Omar has repeatedly engaged in behavior that undermines the values of this nation, and today we address it." A murmur spread through the chamber. Some Republicans nodded in agreement, while Democrats shifted in their seats, whispering to one another. "This resolution proposes a full congressional review of Omar's activities, including potential actions regarding her status as a U.S. representative." Omar sat stone-faced as the words filled the room. She had expected attacks, but this was something else. They were treating her as if she were an enemy of the state. A few seats away, Congresswoman Rachel Carter, a fellow Democrat, whispered to her, "They can't be serious. There's no legal ground for this." Omar exhaled. "They don't need legal ground. They just need to create doubt." The hearing erupted into a shouting match. Democrats accused the Republicans of a witch hunt, while Holloway and his supporters stood firm, insisting that Omar needed to answer for her alleged actions. Then, as the chaos reached a peak, Omar stood up. The entire room fell silent. "If you have accusations, make them," she said. "But I won't sit here and be silenced by fear-mongering." All eyes were now on her. The fight had officially begun. The media exploded. The hearings became a national spectacle. News outlets ran endless coverage, and social media was flooded with debates. Some saw the motion against Omar as a justified inquiry into a controversial figure. Others saw it as a direct attack on democracy itself. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, tensions grew. In a private meeting, Holloway sat with his Republican allies. "We have to make this airtight. If we fail, we look like fools. If we succeed, we reshape the conversation in Washington forever." At the same time, Omar was meeting with her legal team. "They want me gone," she said bluntly. "They'll use any loophole, any misstep. We cannot afford to underestimate them." The battle wasn't just being fought in Congress. It was being waged across television screens, living rooms, and online forums nationwide. And the stakes couldn't be higher. As tensions reached a boiling point, new information surfaced. A leak. A confidential memo from Holloway's office was obtained by an investigative journalist. The contents were explosive. "This resolution is as much about Omar as it is about shaping the next election. If we can make this scandal big enough, we control the narrative." The media pounced. News anchors dissected every word. Had this always been a political strategy rather than a genuine concern? Omar wasted no time. At her press conference, she held up the document. "This," she said, "is proof that this was never about justice. This was about power." The backlash against the Republicans was immediate. Protesters doubled in numbers. Even some conservatives began distancing themselves from Holloway. Suddenly, the tide was turning. The leaked memo set Washington ablaze. News stations ran wall-to-wall coverage, debating the implications of the document that exposed Holloway's true motivations. On one side, conservatives doubled down, insisting that the resolution against Omar was about protecting national values. On the other, Democrats and civil rights groups blasted the effort as a blatant political stunt, meant to smear Omar ahead of the next election cycle. Within the Capitol, the tension boiled over. In a private Republican caucus, Holloway paced the room, his hands clenched into fists. "This changes nothing," he declared, his voice firm. "We stick to the facts, her actions, her statements. The people still believe in what we're doing." But his allies weren't as confident. Senator James Whitmore, who had initially supported the resolution, shook his head. "Mark, we just got caught admitting that this was political. We can't just pretend that didn't happen." Holloway slammed his hand on the table. "And what? We back off now? If we retreat, we hand Omar a massive victory. Do you want her to walk out of this as a hero?" Silence filled the room. Meanwhile, Omar was meeting with her team. She held the leaked memo in her hands, her expression unreadable. "This is it," she said. "This is how we turn the tables." Her campaign strategist, Leah Fitzgerald, nodded. "We need to push this hard. This isn't just an attack on you, Ilhan. This is an attack on anyone who speaks out against them." Omar exhaled. "Then let's make sure they regret it." As she walked out of the meeting, she had one goal in mind, not just to survive this attack, but to turn it back on them. The Capitol hearing room was packed, every seat filled, every eye locked onto the unfolding drama. The air crackled with tension, and the steady clicking of cameras created an almost rhythmic backdrop to the political showdown. Ilhan Omar sat poised at the witness table, her face unreadable. Across from her, Congressman Mark Holloway adjusted his microphone, his expression tight. This was supposed to be his moment, the culmination of months of political maneuvering to remove Omar from office. But the leaked memo had changed everything. A journalist sitting in the front row whispered to a colleague, "This just turned into a bloodbath." Omar tapped the printed copy of the leaked document resting on the table before her. "Congressman, let's not waste any time. You've accused me of endangering national security. But your own internal memo reveals that this hearing isn't about the Constitution. It's about your re-election campaign. The silence that followed was electric. Holloway's jaw clenched. That document is out of context, he snapped. This is about your actions, not mine. Omar leaned forward, her voice calm but sharp. Then let's talk about actions. My work in Congress has been transparent. I fight for my constituents. Meanwhile, you have been caught red-handed, using your position to wage a political war against someone you personally dislike. The Democratic side of the room erupted in murmurs of approval. Even a few Republicans shifted uncomfortably in their seats. From the press gallery, a CNN anchor whispered into his microphone, "This is not going the way Republicans planned." Holloway, visibly sweating, took a slow breath. He still had one last card to play. He straightened his posture and lowered his voice to a grave tone. "Representative Omar, the American people deserve to know where your loyalties truly lie." A collective gasp swept the room. Omar's expression hardened. "There it is," she said softly. "The real reason we're here." Holloway pressed forward, emboldened. "You have been repeatedly criticized for your views on foreign policy. You have questioned long-standing alliances. You have held my country accountable." Omar interjected. "That's what we're supposed to do here, Congressman. That's what governing means." She glanced around the chamber. "I am not on trial here, but maybe you should be." The Republican side bristled. Holloway's face twisted in frustration. "Enough!" he barked. "I move that we proceed to the vote immediately." The chairman hesitated. The tension in the room was thick. Then, with a nod, he relented. "The motion has been made," he said. "We proceed to a final vote. Now." The chamber fell into a hushed, almost eerie silence as the voting began. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The climax of weeks of political warfare, media scrutiny, and backdoor lobbying. Each senator held the power to decide not just Omar's fate, but their own political futures. Some were eager to push her out, seeing her as a divisive figure. Others hesitated, feeling the weight of public opinion shifting. One by one, the names were called. Senator Whitmore, a prominent Republican expected to vote in favor of Omar's removal, paused. The room held its breath. Then, no. The collective gasp was almost audible. For the first time, cracks appeared in the Republican coalition. Holloway's grip on the podium tightened. "Senator Ramirez?" Another hesitation. Then, no. Gasps turned into murmurs. Journalists whispered into their microphones, reporting on the stunning shift happening in real time. Omar kept her face composed, but she could feel her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Holloway's face twitched, his fingers drumming anxiously against his desk. This wasn't the plan. Then, as the tally continued, the shift became undeniable. "Senator Collins?" Another Republican defector. "No." Holloway's aides were scrambling. A frantic text message from one read, "We're losing control. What do we do?" Holloway ignored his phone. His mind was racing. By now, the Democrats sat straighter in their chairs. Omar remained still, her expression unreadable. But inside, she knew. This was it. Finally, the last name was called. The numbers flashed across the screen in bold white letters. Resolution fails. 47 to 53. For a split second, there was complete silence. Then, chaos. The chamber erupted into a storm of reactions. Some senators slammed their hands on the table. Others looked stunned, caught between disbelief and relief. The Democratic side broke into subdued smiles, some exchanging handshakes. Holloway sat motionless, staring at the result. his face drained of color. This was a nightmare. "Impossible," he muttered under his breath. "This was supposed to be locked in." The chairperson's gavel slammed down. "The resolution has failed. This hearing is adjourned." Omar finally exhaled deeply, not in triumph, but in relief. She had survived. For now, outside the Capitol, the scene was pandemonium. Protesters celebrated, chanting Omar's name. Others held signs denouncing Holloway's political maneuvering. Inside the newsrooms, the story dominated headlines. "Congress votes against Omar's removal. Shocking twist in political drama." Is this the end of the attack on Omar? Holloway defeated. What's next for the GOP strategist? The moment had already become one of the most watched political events of the year. On social media, millions of posts flooded Twitter and Facebook. One trending topic stood out: "Number Holloway exposed." Meanwhile, deep inside the Capitol, Holloway sat fuming in his office. His top advisors stood before him, shifting uncomfortably. "We need to get ahead of this," one of them finally said. "The press is making you look like a fool. If we don't control the narrative—" Holloway slammed his fist on the desk. "I don't need a lecture," he snapped. "I need a strategy." His aides fell silent. Holloway leaned back, breathing heavily. The leaked memo had destroyed their entire plan. But he wasn't done. Not by a long shot. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Not yet." Omar stepped out onto the steps of the Capitol, flanked by her staff. A massive crowd awaited her. Reporters thrust microphones forward, shouting questions. She raised a hand, signaling for silence. Then, in a measured but powerful voice, she spoke. "They tried to silence me. They failed. Because the truth always wins." The crowd erupted in cheers. Across Washington, political analysts scrambled to assess the damage. Some called it a landmark moment in modern politics. Others speculated that Holloway's career was finished. But one thing was certain: this wasn't the last battle. As Omar walked back inside, her chief of staff leaned in. "Holloway isn't going to let this go." Omar nodded. She already knew, because while this fight was over, the war was just beginning. And that brings us to the end of this incredible story. What we witnessed today was not just a political battle, but a true test of power, strategy, and resilience. Ilhan Omar found herself at the center of a storm, with pressures mounting and decisions that could change everything. But what happens next? Will the tides shift in her favor? Or is this just the beginning of a much larger showdown? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into political intrigue, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious.